There was a time when America seemed untouched by sorrow, when every sunrise promised progress, and every family dreamed the same dream. The 1950s were that moment, a glittering decade of hope and harmony. From the hum of new cars to the laughter in suburban yards, it felt as if the future had finally arrived. But beneath the calm surface, the world was changing. Whispers of rebellion, fear, and awakening were beginning to stir. The perfect picture of America, smiling, certain, and strong, was already starting to crack. What followed wasn't just a change in time, but a transformation of the nation's very soul. This is the story of how that golden age came to an end, and how, from its fading light, a new America was born. This is the American Rewind, and this is the day the old America died. There was once an America that believed everything was possible. An America of white picket fences, drive-in theatres and Sunday dinners. A country that had emerged from the ashes of war stronger than ever, proud, confident, and full of dreams. The 1950s were the golden years, or so we remember them. It was the age of Elvis and Eisenhower, of booming suburbs and shiny Chevrolets. Families gathered around television sets, children played safely in the streets, and everyone seemed to know what tomorrow would bring. But the truth is, that world didn't last. The old America, the one we still see in black and white photographs, didn't end in one moment, but in a slow unravelling. By the dawn of the 1960s, the dream had begun to fade, and the day the old America died was the day a new one was born. To understand how it ended, we must first understand what it really was. The 1950s are often remembered as a time of perfection, a picture of unity and stability. After World War II, the United States stood alone as the world's superpower. The economy was booming. Soldiers returned home to start families, and millions moved into new suburban homes built on optimism. Factories produced everything from televisions to toasters. Teenagers had spending money for the first time, and the birth of consumer culture turned America into a marketplace of dreams. But beneath the polished surface, cracks were forming. Not everyone shared in the prosperity. Racial segregation still divided towns and schools. Women who had worked in factories during the war were told to return home, and conformity, that quiet pressure to fit in, silenced anyone who questioned the system. The 1950s were shining on the outside, but uneasy within. The perfect smile of that decade hid a sense of doubt, one that would soon explode into the open. Behind the cheer of post-war America, fear was quietly spreading. The Cold War turned neighbours into suspects and filled every classroom with the shadow of nuclear war. Children practiced duck and cover drills, crouching under desks as sirens wailed. Television shows interrupted broadcasts with test messages in case of atomic attack. And across the nation, the Red Scare gripped hearts and minds. Senator Joseph McCarthy hunted down alleged communists, destroying reputations in the name of national security. It was a time when even the whisper of dissent could ruin a career. The dream of freedom was haunted by paranoia, and as the fear deepened, Americans began to realize that their golden age rested on fragile ground. Every generation inherits the world its parents build, and every generation eventually challenges it. By the mid-1950s, cracks in the calm surface of America began to widen. Teenagers, a new cultural force, started to question the rules. They had grown up in comfort, but they didn't feel connected to the promises their parents believed in. Rock and roll blasted from jukeboxes. shaking up polite society. Elvis Presley's hip movements scandalized the older generation, but thrilled the young. James Dean, with his tragic rebellion in Rebel Without a Cause, became the face of youth frustration. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a signal. The children of the 1950s were restless. They wanted authenticity, not appearances. And soon, their generation would lead a cultural revolution that would rewrite American life forever. If one event shattered the illusion of 1950s unity, it was the Civil Rights Movement. In 1954, the Supreme Court declared racial segregation in schools unconstitutional. A year later, in Montgomery, Alabama, a quiet woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus, sparking a nationwide protest led by a young preacher named Martin Luther King Jr. Television, the new window into the American home, broadcast images of peaceful protesters being attacked by police. It was impossible to look away. The country could no longer pretend that the American dream was equal for everyone. As marches grew, as songs of freedom echoed through the South, the old America, the one built on silence and separation, began to crumble. A new, more honest nation was being born through pain and courage. Every era has a day when everything changes, a day that divides before and after. For many, that day came on November 22nd, 1963, when shots rang out in Dallas, Texas, and President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Something far greater than one man was lost. It was the death of innocence, the end of the belief that America was untouchable, blessed, pure, and destined for perfection. People cried openly in the streets. Television carried the grief into every living room. In that moment, the world seemed to tilt, and the old America, the confident and unshakable America of the 1950s, was gone forever. What followed was an age of turmoil. The Vietnam War, protests, assassinations, and a generation that no longer trusted the leaders their parents had revered. The old world had died, and something uncertain had taken its place. By the end of the 1960s, the transformation was complete. The tidy homes and smiling families of the 1950s gave way to campuses filled with protesters, long hair and guitars. Television now showed not idealized sitcoms, but real suffering. Body bags returning from Vietnam, cities burning in riots, a flag divided by ideology. But in the chaos came creativity. Music, art, and politics began to reflect the real heartbeat of a diverse and conflicted nation. The civil rights movement, feminism, and environmentalism reshaped the moral landscape. The old America, with its simple certainties, was gone. Yet the spirit of freedom, rebellion, and self-expression that replaced it would define the modern world. When we look back on the 1950s, we often do so with nostalgia. We see clean streets, stable families, and a shared sense of purpose. We imagine a country more united, more certain of its destiny. But nostalgia is selective. It remembers the good and forgets the pain. The truth is, the old America had to die for the new one to be born. The innocence of the 1950s was beautiful, but it was also blind. Blind to injustice, blind to inequality, blind to the changes waiting just beyond the horizon. When the 1960s arrived, the curtain lifted, and while chaos followed, so did truth. The America that emerged, loud, diverse, questioning, was no longer the one of perfect smiles. but it was more real. The day the old America died wasn't marked by fire or revolution. It faded quietly, in songs, in marches, in a generation's demand to be heard. It died when the nation stopped pretending everything was fine and started asking what it truly meant to be free. And though we may mourn the loss of that simpler world, its end gave birth to something greater, a country unafraid to face itself. Because sometimes, for a dream to live, another one must die. The old America didn't vanish in a single day. It drifted away like a fading photograph. Its streets, its songs, its dreams, all slipped quietly into history. Yet in its passing, a new nation was born, one louder, freer, more complicated, and more real. The 1950s gave us comfort, but the years that followed gave us conscience. They forced America to look in the mirror and ask who it truly was. And maybe that's what growing up as a country really means. Letting go of innocence to find truth. The old America may have died, but its echoes remain in our music, our memories, and our endless search for something better. Because the story of America has never been about perfection. It's about becoming. This was the American Rewind. Thank you for watching and for remembering the world that once was.